And good morning and welcome to Building Your Dream Team, a key to securing film financing, brought to you by the Independent Film and Television Alliance and presented by Rapbook Payroll. And my name is Robin Burt. I'm the Vice President of Marketing and Membership for the Independent Film and Television Alliance and the American film market that is taking place in Las Vegas, November 5 through 10 at the Palms Casino Resort. And we hope you will join us in Vegas in less than 4 weeks' time. So today's webinar is part of a three-part series focused on the realities of film financing today. And before we get started, I'd like to share a short video from our friends at Rapbook, the production industry's only on-demand payroll and accounting platform, helping film productions to pay their crews with a click and generate reports on demand and manage production accounting in real time. And before I introduce the moderator, I just wanted to let everyone know that we will be taking questions from the audience. So click on the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our moderator, Ryan Broussard, who is the VP of Sales and Production Incentives at Rapbook. He's worked with productions of all sizes, from the largest studio features to the smallest independent projects, to help them optimize their production incentive strategies and make the most of their budgets. Ryan has worked on production incentives from nearly every possible angle and developing innovative reporting measures to facilitate faster audits, for advising countless productions on state tax incentives and helping states and local jurisdictions design their incentive program. Ryan is a true industry veteran. And with that, I hand it over to Ryan.
Thanks, Robin. Appreciate it. Very happy to be here, and for Rapbook to be a sponsor for today's event. I'm very happy to be moderating this panel today with some amazing panelists, some of which I've been on the panels with before in the past, and super excited to have this conversation with all of you today. As Robin stated, there is a Q&A section. Please utilize that as we're going. I do want this to feel conversational and almost like a round table, and hopefully you guys get a lot of entertainment and interaction, and then also some information out of it. When doing these panels, whether I've been a panelist on them or hosting them, one of the things that does come up, and it's usually a finance-centric panel, is, hey, you got to have a good team. You surround yourself with good people. It seems to come up quite a bit over and over again on all these panels. So when this panel came up, I thought this was a great idea to kind of showcase the key roles, key people that you do want on your show, to make sure that there is confidence when being financed, to make sure that your project is successful. So with that, I do want to start welcoming the panelists. I would love for each of them to introduce themselves and talk about their role on the team, on how they drive success for a project, and a little bit about themselves and who they work for, if they work for themselves or whatever. So with that, I'll start with Dewan. If you want to start, and once again, tell us a little bit about yourself and your role and why. And we don't have to get cocky. We don't mean to be patting ourselves on the back, but just why a production would work with someone in your role, someone of your caliber for success. So Dewan.
So my name is Dewan Fox. I'm a producer, line producer in UPM. Usually I am brought on, even when I work in my producerial capacity, I deal with more of the line producerial task. And so as a line producer, I'm right in the middle of the above the line people and the below the line. And I manage the budget, and I manage the day-to-day operations, hiring, and most of the time, I'm also dealing with, or all the time, I'm dealing with the guilds and the unions at the same time.
Wow.
So, yeah, usually they bring me on to get the boat out the harbor, is how I always put it. You know, someone has a boat, they know where they want to go, but they don't know how to get there. Then they bring me in, and sure enough, the boat or the train starts moving once I get in.
Yeah, and it sounds like it's more than just like at the start. It also sounds like all the things you listed, and we'll talk more about that as we're chatting today. But you're a lot of the glue. I mean, you're talking about the above the line, below the line, the unions, all that good stuff. So kind of the glue of the production as well. And we'll expand on that as we go. Jackie, you want to go next?
Yeah, I've actually worked with Dwan in that capacity before. I'm Jackie Ward. I'm an attorney at Ramo Law representing producers and financiers, primarily in all forms of media and content. So where we come in, especially as part of the production team, obviously, as soon as you have a deal to paper or even just a deal to close, whether that's financing or cast attachments or package elements that come on at the beginning, all the way, through your distribution deals, working with the guilds, any 911 that may come up. That's not always us that deals with it, but we're sort of the people that know the attorneys that you need for the nuanced issues. So we're your first call on the legal front for anything production related.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think it's great because a lot of times people think legal or they think like, oh, I'm creating a production. Who do I need? I need an actor. I need a director. They don't always think about legal. But as we'll talk about today, it's so crucial for the financing and for the overall protection of your show. So that's great. Jason?
Yeah, my name's Jason Marchoner. I'm the owner of 10 Key Accounting. We are a production accounting firm. I do key accounting on independent movies ranging in size from $1 million up to $30-40 million. I do budgeting, cash flows. I make sure all the crew gets paid, all the vendors get paid, cost reporting to the studio on a weekly basis. And usually I'm on through wrap all the way till delivery of the movie.
Yeah, so crucial. I always say in accounting, accounting is kind of the backbone of the show in the sense that like if you don't pay people, people don't think about that, but if people aren't getting paid right, pitchforks and torches could come out. So let's make sure all of that is done
Yeah.
correctly.
We are the redheaded stepchildren of production, that's for sure.
but a much needed child of production. And we'll chat more about that. Patrick?
Patrick Rosati. My background is a physical producer. Have made my first movie 2007. Have now produced around 20 movies since then. And 3 years ago, roughly, started a company called Blue Fox Financing. And now we really do a tremendous amount of loans in the collateralized space, tax credits, pre-sales, gap financing. We have a marketplace, so we work with a lot of the lenders and banks that are currently doing this. In addition to that, we've closed our own round of financing, and our financing is now being used to help all of the lenders that we're currently working with on kind of going outside the scope of a loan that they can't necessarily do. And yeah, and we also have a distribution and sales side in Blue Fox Entertainment. So between all of that, we really do a lot of the various types of development, production, distribution, and independent filmmaking.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to pinpoint what you guys do in just one sentence because you kind of run such an amazing gamut of all the things that are needed to get that. I'm gonna say this a lot because I like to Dewan boat off the shore. So you carry so much of that with the financing, the tax credits, the distribution, and all that fun stuff. So for my sake, I work for Rapbook. We are a production payroll company, so you do want to make sure, as Jason mentioned, when you're paying people that you're compliant, doing it correctly. I also help a lot with tax incentives and advise on that, as Robin stated at the beginning. And then, you know, with Wrapbook, we do have a next generation accounting system that allows you to keep track of all your numbers and make sure that your T's are crossed and I's are dotted for the sake of audits and all that fun stuff that come at the end of your production. So this is great. As you guys see, we have an amazing team here. Now, this doesn't cover the whole team. You know, obviously there's other people that are involved when making a production. But here's some really key members, some of which, Jason, you said it, redheaded stepchild, I didn't, may be forgotten or not thought of right away. What would you say, and this is to the group, are other key members that you see? And Patrick, maybe we could start with you and kind of start us off, but like you want to see when you're starting to, you know, look into financing a show or a show's getting off the ground. You're like, let me see, do they have this person or this role already attached to this? Is it somebody like Dewan, or what would it be?
Yeah, I think the good and bad news is there's never any one right lane to go down that is the best path in development. I think it's a two-hander. You know, on one hand, you are looking at what is the package on the creative on the film. You know, who's the writer, who's the director, is there talent attached, is there enough there for this team who's on this panel to grab a hold of it and really help support it and bring the financing together. I would say a combination of all of these guys are a great combo to have. Certainly Dewan would be probably my first phone call, other than on the legal side, calling Jackie to make sure I have the rights protected. But the number one thing is, what is this movie going to cost? And that's, we get that a lot on, you read a script and that script could be made for $20 million or $2 million a lot of times. And so that would be the first area that I'd go down, is like, what's the most cost efficient way for us to make this as a baseline, and then kind of build your plan around that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And Dewan, like in the same boat, like we kind of get in this chicken or the egg scenario with movie making, because like Patrick said, there's no wrong or right way to do it. I feel like you're kind of throwing spaghetti at the wall, but there is a comfort that I think that everyone here feels of like, hey, I see that they're working with Blue Fox, or they're working with 10 Key, or Jackie at Memo, or Dewan's attached to this. What roles do you like to see already filled by the time you get that boat? Or are you first in there? Are you first to jump in the boat? Are you the champion?
I usually am one of the first calls.
Yeah.
Projects come to me at, as Patrick said, chicken or egg scenarios, but it's mainly a producer brings me a project. They haven't attached a director yet, but they want to know how much it's going to cost. Or a producer director or a director brings me a project and they want to know, you know, everybody, what is this going to cost me? Or I have this much, can I do it for this?
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I'm usually right in that first call. And,
Yeah.
you know, which I think it's a very creative position to be in, because now you're just like, okay, well, let's see, how are we going to do this? If you have a director attached, you've got some answers. If you just have a bunch of producers, now you're speculating things. So you just
Okay.
have to know where they want to end up at the end of the day.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's actually a good answer to the question, in the sense of like other roles that we want to see. It kind of sounds like you would have a comfort of like, oh, there's a director attached, you know, so there's a name there. Would talent be in that as well? Like a director talent, now you feel good about, you know, jumping into the boat with this, depending on who that director or talent could be.
Sorry, 100% with talent. I mean, talent's going to make you go, oh, they've got these people attached. Okay. And you also know where their budget range can live, depending on what names they have attached, because, you know, the whole random, what is somebody worth? You kind of know, well, with these names, you can go from this budget range all the way up to this budget range. You know, with an ensemble, you can go here. With one name, you know, so yeah, that means a lot as well.
Yeah.
They're all factors.
Yeah, I know. That's the thing. It's like we talk about the team And I feel like if we were to get every role on the team, we might have more panelists than attendees, because you need so many people. It takes an army sometimes to make one of these things. But, you know, Jackie, with that type of mentality of like, hey, let's make sure that the boat is fully stocked with people that you feel comfortable with working with, does it matter when they come to you of who's already attached? Like, do you want to see a Patrick or a Dewan attached before you guys start engaging? Because to be frank, I'm a little ignorant of all the stuff that the legal carries. And I hope I speak for some of the people in the audience as well. I know it's necessary. I know that every successful production has to go through it, and there's so many things to protect yourself that you need to do. But the ins and outs of what you cover, I'd love to hear you kind of go through that for the audience and people that think, why do I need to talk to somebody that specializes in legal of this industry?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends. Look, do I love to see a Patrick or Dewan in my email on the thread as part of the team? Absolutely. And part of that's because I know that I have support of a team of pros, right? Because it's especially at that deal term stage, a lot of it's business terms, a lot of it's things that, you know, Patrick or Dewan are very capable of handling. If you don't have that role on the production, you're doing a lot more forecasting, a lot more fact finding, where I can sort of rely on, you know, if I'm talking to Dewan about a cast deal and he says, yeah, first position credit, MFN on fee, I kind of trust that he knows there's not going to be, you know, there's not a bigger role in the script that I haven't read or something that I need to ask about, right? Or sometimes, you know, I am asking those questions because a client's saying, oh yeah, this is my first deal, absolutely, I'm so excited. But it's like, hey, wait a second, is there this big role? Is there this big cameo, somebody that you may want to give more money to for 2 days? And so a lot of it is just knowing, you know, what your team looks like and what the DNA looks like and how much fact finding you have to do about the nature of a project, because really, especially on the legal front, it's all intertwined, right? Like your financing deal, your definition or your waterfall fits into your cast deals, your director deals, your distribution deals. And so it's really about architecting that puzzle. And, you know, the best of the best will forecast the issues that may come up. And when you have a team of people around you that can sort of talk in shorthand and help you forecast those things and put out fires as they come up, that, you know, house will be built much more efficiently. So it's great to see a strong team around you. And as you start to work with people too, I mean, you start to get a shorthand and you sort of know what people's strengths and weaknesses are. And that's the fun part with me, is when I have, you know, a long-standing client relationship that I've dealt with for 3 or 4 years. And it's like, you know, we can just send a text to each other and it's like, okay, we got this, we know what's happening. And so that's the strength of a team, especially a team that's worked together for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, one of the questions that came up, I'm reading the questions, by the way, guys, so I do see them as they're coming through, because I see them all there. I'm hoping we answer some of them as we're going, and we'll get to some more at the end. But budgets are coming up quite a bit. Jason, you've mentioned that you can do things as early as working on the budget to the cash flow before you even kind of jump into the actual, you know, real-time accounting. So like Dewan, you're kind of seeing that budget early. How early, because the budget is such a factor with maybe getting the talent. That's what the question was, is, hey, don't we need like a legit budget and, you know, in place before we can even approach talent sometimes? How early are you being engaged to look at a budget? And Dewan, this will probably waterfall onto you as well, but Jason, you know, when that happens.
I look at the budget as soon as I'm brought on. The line producer will call me, tell me they have a project set up. If it's a bonded project, I have to review the budget carefully and sign off on it, saying that all the fringes are correct, everything makes sense. When I'm brought on, I usually request the budget, the schedule, and the script, so I can make sure that the budget that was created matches the script, because I've received budgets and I'll read the script and I'll be like, there's no way that this movie can be made for $1.5 million. This is a $3 million movie. It's completely misbudgeted. And then I'll be able to bring that up with the line producer early on, so we don't end up doing a project and it going dramatically over budget. And then I'll use the budget to start creating cash flows and everything, so we know how the funding should be rolling in.
Mm-hmm. And Dewan, like with you, with a budget, are you getting it before sometimes talent is attached? Like, is you know, Jason's saying he's getting it from the line producer. So are you dealing with that so early on to where there's no talent attached to anything? You really are the sole person in the house and you've got a budget sitting in front of you. Is that the reality? And so it kind of opens the door a lot, because a lot of people are asking for your information in the chat, because I think they're starting to realize, hey, I might need to talk to Dewan first as a first time filmmaker. But, you know, is that too early to engage you of, hey, I just have a budget and I just have a script?
Well, no, it's not too early, because actually most people engage me to create the budget. So usually I'm just given a script and an idea. We think we have 5 million. We think we have 2 we have what, you know, can you do it for 17, whatever number, right? 34, whatever. And try not to get lost in the weeds here, because you know I can geek out on budgets.
Go for it, man. We'll follow you in the woods. Go for it.
But you have a script, and I love those scenes where people flip through the pages and they go, this feels like 34 million. It does get to be that one at a certain point. You do get that way because you read it and you go, oh, 25 crowd scenes. You know, where it's like, you know, and it's not just like a small little diner, but it's a stadium full of people or a ballroom. So you automatically know right there, you're looking at, you know, that day right there in the ballroom could be $20,000 just on those extras. But you start with figuring out where your producers want to be, how much they think they can raise. And then you say, okay, well, this is going to put you, then you think about your guilds and your unions and you go, this is going to put you under this particular contract. So that's where your numbers start. Your numbers start with knowing that you're going to be a low budget, you're going to be a basic contract with SAG. So I usually start with SAG, right? And then I go into the IA, because that's your biggest line item. Labor is your biggest line item always, right? So then you go, okay, well, if I'm in the basic contract, that means it's with SAG, that means I'm going to be above $3 million, which means, you know, so now I've got to go, IA goes, I think it's 7.5 million. Is anything below 7.5, you're in low budget. You're in their tiers. But once you go over that, now you're in their basic. So, you know, you just have to start ranging that. And within each contract, there are set rates for your union and your unions and your guilds. So it kind of starts to spell itself out.
Yeah.
Then the creative part happens, where you go, well, how many people in the art department do I need? Oh, this is a big ballroom scene, and now it's a period piece. So now my wardrobe department is just doubled, right? You know, and all these, so you start to get into those weeds.
Yeah.
You know, and it takes time. So
Yeah.
I'd also say that as important as the budget is, which is crucially important, it's also important to take a little bit of a step back to be like, all right, what talent are you going to? Because that talent, and it's depending on the talent, has a certain value, you know, both domestically and internationally. And because any script, there is somewhat of moving parts of how much or how little it could be made for. And we certainly can get into that, because I actually have experience with Dewan in a movie where he backed in a budget that, out of all the movies I've done, and most of which are independent and a low level, under 5 million, he did something that I didn't think was possible on a budget level that was all union in Los Angeles. And I say this because, you know, the budget is really the baseline, but the most important element other than the budget is who's the cast and how are you going to go close financing with that package. And so, you know, you can go create a $3 million budget, but then you're somewhat dictated within that 3 million of what you're going to offer a talent for an actor. And that actor offer within that 3 million may be nowhere near what you need in order to get that actor. So for example, you know, on a $3 million budget, if you're offering an actor $1 million, Now you really have a $2 million budget with $1 million of it off the top going into an actor. And so you have to kind of be looking at it through both ways of like, all right, let's get a really good idea of what this budget is, so we have somewhat of a baseline. But who is the cast? What are the offers that we're making? Do we have any equity attached to the project at all? How are we putting the financing of this movie together? And then many times, as I'm sure all of us can attest to, the budget backs into the amount of money you have. And there's a threshold at that point of, do we want to make this movie? This is all the money we have right now, with maybe some equity, a tax credit, some pre-sales. If you're lucky enough to get a domestic distribution deal, that's what you have. And then you have to look at it and say, can we make this? And that's what Dwan, on our movie that we did together, he came back with a budget that we're like, all right, let's do it. And we did it. And we finished under budget. But it was, if he didn't have that budget laid out in great detail and going over it over and over and over again, I wouldn't have entrusted the financing. You know, I would have felt uncomfortable that the financier, we weren't going to go over budget.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's such a big call out of, and Jack, you mentioned this too, you just have certain people that you have confidence in, that you've worked with before. And not only that, like, this is a small industry, and networking is so big. So I do think it's crucial that maybe it's not somebody that, like, or Jackie knows, but maybe Dwan, and Dwan knows somebody. Or maybe you're talking to Jason, and Jason's like, oh, I've worked with that line producer before. He's great, or she's great. So all of that carries weight in this industry. I do want to touch on, Jason was talking about, the type of people he has to create and work with at the beginning on when he's given the budget. And he mentioned, because this came up twice in the questions, he mentioned a bond company. Is that crucial? Because I work on a lot of independents. Sometimes they're bonded and sometimes they're not. So a lot of times newer filmmakers don't understand when that needs to be engaged, if it has to be engaged, what it is. Is it a crucial part of the team with the production? And I'll leave this kind of open, whoever wants to jump in first. But why would you need the bond company? And can you make a production without it? Because obviously we see independents not get bonded. Sometimes even a bond company doesn't want to bond something if they're at a certain level. But I'm curious of your thoughts of if it's needed, when do you need it, and all that good stuff.
Well, I'll let Patrick take it, but I just wanted to say that, yeah, in the indie world, it's rare to see, in the true indie world, it's rare to see the bond company, especially if your budgets are below 5. When you get kind of above 5 and definitely in the 7s, then you see the bond company start stepping in. And it's really there to protect your investors, or protect the project, really. But go ahead, Patrick or Jackie. I see Jackie.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Jackie.
Yeah, I mean, for me, they're my best and my worst friend, right? And it's sort of like it's a tool that it's a necessary evil a lot of times, because they're sort of looking for me. They're looking over my shoulder, right? They're doing another check on all the deals. They're making sure that, we're not sliding anything through, that everything's going to match up at the end of the day, and that the production's all buttoned up and everything's going to come together. And it's an added layer of very strict due diligence that, as an attorney and as a producer, you don't always want to deal with. But at the end of the day, they are sort of there to primarily protect the production, make sure that the production is successful. Because what they do is, if the production's not successful, is that, they're there to take over and make sure that the film gets completed for the financier's safety, is essentially at the end of the day. And so it can be an added element of almost feeling like you're negotiating with opposing counsel before you even get that contract to opposing counsel a lot of the time. But they are also quality control. They're there to protect your investors in case something completely goes wrong. And so when you're dealing in that, as Dwan, I was going to say 5 million too, is what Dwan said, when you're dealing in that, $5 to $40+ million, indie space, they're usually around. And they're definitely somebody that you want to be friends with, and you want to make sure that you're very transparent with. And they're a close team member, at least for me, on a financial closing or something like that, that they're really in the weeds with it, on it with you. I'm sure Jason and Patrick have their own opinions.
Yeah,
about
Jason, go
it.
ahead. I'll finish up after you.
Yeah, the bond company, like she said, could be your best friend or your worst enemy.
Yeah.
They control the cash flow, they control when money will get released to you. They closely look over your cost report on a weekly basis. I generally have meetings with them, and they will also determine who you can and can't have on a project. But the one thing I do like about them is they keep producers in check, because sometimes producers can try to run away with the budget or would run away with the money and start spending, and they will jump in there and say, like, no, you can't do this. Everything needs to pass through accounting. You can't just take money out of the bank account. You can't send wires. Only accounting can do that. And that gives me more control over the budget, over the cost report, to make sure that I'm not being hit with any surprises.
Yeah, I mean, I would say too that, you know, you can have a whole hour conversation on a bond and the concept of a bond, because regardless of the bond itself, you should be looking at your film and in essence doing your own bond, you know, monitoring it, lining up with what a bond company would do. You know, and I'm going to drill down a little bit on what everyone said. You know, Dwan had mentioned the under $5 million movie. I mean, it's almost impossible to get a film bonded under $5 million, just because of the costs associated with a bond. And at some point, the bond company's not going to take the risk for 2% of a budget or 3% of a budget when it's a $2.5 million film. It's not worth the risk for them. And on the opposite side, it's not worth the cost of the bond for the independent filmmaker to be paying 3% of the entire budget to have a company, as what Jackie said, looking over your shoulder to make sure you're not overspending. Because I think personally, the downside of a bond is at some point, as what Jackie said, they're going to take the movie over from the producers, from everyone, and it's their job to deliver the film. So at some point, the creative, in my opinion, somewhat goes out the window, and it becomes more of a logistical thing of making sure the bond company doesn't come out of pocket, and that they can deliver the movie within the budget. So, you know, a lot of these independent financiers, they don't really necessarily want a bond if it's a good producer and team and legal and accounting, because, you know, the team that's all on here should be doing what a bond would be doing anyway, which is overseeing it weekly, making sure if anything starts going over in a particular department, they're adjusting it literally daily on the spend, and it's lining up. I will say, you know, this is where Jason shines in a massive way, because on the accounting side, you know, early in my career, we would just find any local accounting firm in a particular state, and it was a terrible mistake. And many times we didn't realize we were over budget until many weeks later, sometimes 2 weeks after we wrap production, did it actually catch back up to itself. So the combination of legal, line producer, and accountant, if you have a really great team, you're running on all cylinders. You know what I mean? Like you're knowing pretty much daily where you're at the end of the day, and you can adjust accordingly and not necessarily need a bond. And the last thing I want to say, and I'll shut up, is you know, me coming from the financing side, there's a lot of banks and a lot of lenders that won't even do a deal without a bond. So you also have to juggle that component of, if you're getting a loan against a tax credit, if you're getting a loan against Lionsgate pre-sale or international pre-sales, a lot of these lenders, they say, all right, you're either going to have to do a bond, or you're going to have to do a guarantee, a personal guarantee or a corporate guarantee, some of which are all of the above. So you're also juggling that side depending on whose money you're using and how you're financing your film.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just to jump in real quick, the bond
please,
company, one
please.
other thing that's important is relationships with the bond company. When I first started doing movies, I actually got turned down. The bond company didn't know me, didn't know the work I did. So they said, no, he can't work on it. Now I've built up these relationships with them, and you get a lot more flexibility. If they know you, if they know, okay, they're between the line producer and the accountant, they're on top of things. They're more willing to open up that cash flow a little bit, let things slide a little more, And again, it goes back to just relationships and building that network.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the core of this discussion, right? So I'm glad you said that, is just your team, your networking, constantly like networking and building it out, meeting new people, and then figure out who you should talk to. And when I say who you should talk to, I also want to make sure that like everyone here is awesome. Like we're not gonna take that away. But not everybody should just call Dewan, like, because he just won't, he just doesn't have the bandwidth to do it. Okay, so we can't have 400 people email Dewan tomorrow because they want to make their movie. But that role, right? So, and somebody of his caliber is what we're talking about. So, like the key members of those teams, a very experienced accountant, someone in legal. This is what's crucial about this discussion. I do want to go to the questions just because this has come up quite a few times in the questions, and it is something I want to discuss because I do think it affects all of us here on this panel in a variety of ways, and that's locations. It's coming up quite a few questions about the budget for locations, but I'm kind of more interested in hearing once again to the matter of this this panel, the team member of and the people you're surrounding yourself with on locations, whether you're in a tax incentive state or a state you're not familiar with because you're having to go there creatively, or even overseas if you're going to the UK. People asked about Canada, UK. So I'll throw it out there of when you hear there's a project, it's a location maybe you're not familiar with. Does that become almost, a driving force of, do you take the show? Do you not? Do you have to go look for a local line producer? Patrick mentioned working sometimes with local accountants, that maybe aren't in the industry, didn't always work out. Like, does it affect how you build your team?
Oh, it definitely affects how you do it. I've been fortunate enough that I've been able to shoot in 13 different countries, and I didn't have an experience doing it before I did it. And I kind of have developed a model for myself to go, it's my job to go into the unknown. That's really what we're doing when we're making a movie. Every movie is the same and every movie is new, right? So no script is really the same. So there's always elements, like we have to lift up the hood and we have to figure out what's going on. That's the job of what I say my job is, right? Learn how a car works. There are certain things that are going to be the same, and there's certain things that are going to be new. So, and I've filmed in a bunch of different states. One of my favorite places to go to is Montana. And when I first went there, that environment, you land there, you got to scout it, you got to go there. And then my locations person, I find a location scout that has done projects within my price range. For me, that's like a key. They got to know the price range that you're in, because if you're picking somebody who's got this amazing credits, they just came off of Yellowstone. Well, Yellowstone has 6 times the amount of money you do. So, so can they really think in the same mindset as, no, you can't have 12 PAs in the location department. Well, how am I going to do it without 12 PAs? And so you got to find somebody within your price range that's made movies in that price range. And then they start to, I'm ex-military, so I was thinking kind of tactical terms, which is, intelligence preparation of the battlefield. So one of the first things you learn is learn your environment. What is the environment you're going into? And so that's social economical, that's learning what the people are like, and and those locations, because that's going to inform your budget. So I hope I answered the question. Filming in the UK is great. I had a great experience filming in the UK. One of the first people I caught was a local fixer. And then I brought my expertise of knowing that, every neighborhood is the same people. They just kind of look different and act a little different and have a little bit of a tweak That's really it. It's the same people all around the place,
Yeah.
you know, so. You know, and then I can compare Italian crews to certain crews. I can compare Italian crews to Georgia crews. I can compare British crews to LA crews, Budapest crews to LA crews, so blah blah blah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think another important area is going off of what Dwan's saying is how many people can you crew up in a particular area? What is the crew base as a whole? I mean, because there's a lot of these states and cities within these states that you're like, wow, this is an unbelievable tax credit, and you realize that there's 3 people in that locally that you can hire, and you're bringing in way more and ultimately the travel costs and the per diem and all that ends up being netting out way more than what the advantage of the tax credit is. So that's one area to definitely focus on. I mean, Ryan, I'd throw it back on you though, and maybe to talk a minute about Rapbook on the tax credit side, because every one of these areas that we're talking about, it all there's one commonality, which is they all have a tax credit for the most part, and unfortunately or fortunately, you kind of have to have that within your model. It's an extremely important element of financing, both independently and at a studio level, is knowing that there's a percentage of that budget that's going to come back to somebody who's putting up that cash. And I think it'd be smart, maybe Ryan, to mention like what you guys do at an early stage, pre-production stage, to let the filmmakers know what the real tax incentive is in a particular state or city, so that they get a good understanding of what the actual qualified spend, and does it make sense to go to this particular city, or am I netting out going somewhere else where ultimately I can get way more of a tax credit, or it's way less expensive in the production.
Yeah, totally. No, I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, at Rapbook, we are a production payroll company, so payroll is at, the epicenter of what we do in accounting, and finance. But on the front end, as a value add, I do consult on the tax incentive side and do help people when they give me their budgets early on and they say, hey, we're thinking of going to Georgia, we're thinking of going to Montana, Kentucky, wherever. And I try to advise on that. A lot of times they do go in blind, which is scary, kind of to like the point of the question of, does it change the way you approach a production if a location's involved? I always ask, like, do you know a local accountant? Do you know a local line producer, or at least a producer that has, like Dwan, worked in that area, like has some sort of experience? And I know that not everyone wants to hear that, because they say, well, look, it's always going to be your first time at some point, right? Like somebody has to dip their foot in the water and say, well, I've never filmed in Kentucky and here I go. But it is always helpful for me to at least say, like, have you talked to somebody from there? I'll even try to connect them with fellow line producers or accountants that have done work there to advise them, because it's not so much of like, oh, we're going in and blind. It's a matter of the little nuances of these credits and these programs that they don't know about. Like they don't know that, to your point, Patrick, that the crew base is very small there. They're building up infrastructure there. So they have that, they want to get the resident bonus in a particular state so that they get an extra 10%. Well, they said, well, I want to maximize my budget, so I'm going to get all residents. Well, sometimes you physically can't. Like you can't, either because they're not available, or a state is so busy and popular that you thought you could crew up there, but you can't. So you got to fly everybody in, and that wasn't in the budget. The per diem, the travel, the hotel, all that stuff was not in that budget originally. So it's going to impact them dramatically. So I would certainly say, as part of the team building process, is to just at the very least have a conversation with somebody that has some experience, whether it's finance, producing, or accounting in the area you're going to, before you just kind of delve in and say, I read the incentive, I kind of understand it, I see that it's 30% and 20%, and just apply it to your budget and say, let's go. I think you need to get that experienced person to say, hey, this is what you're in for, you know? With,
If I can,
please go ahead.
because actually you guys have hit on some, so back to the practical of it all. If you're going to a place that you haven't been to before, I would say first you start by calling the film commission.
Yeah.
Because the film commission has tons of resources and they want you to be there. So they're going to help you with things. And a lot of times they have their location database, and they also have a list of, I don't know how many projects I've done where they'll give me a scout. They'll just send one of their people, their scouts out just to land the project because you're a client for them. So, and then, yeah, crew base is everything, right? And you usually contemplate that. So that's one of the first questions, like how many films can run at the same time, right? Because that's going to give you that general idea of whether you're bringing in 50% of the crew or 30%. Let's see, and yeah, so there was something else I wanted to put in, but yeah,
You can come back to it.
yeah.
And I will say, you know, Jason and Jackie, to get your opinions, you know, as we're tiptoeing into the tax credit side a bit more, and the legal side and the accounting is critical. You know, I can't stress it enough, because if you do something wrong, it could be as simple as how you set up that corporation. If you did it incorrectly and you spent all that money, you go back to submit it and nothing qualifies. We've seen that before, and in some cases you can't after the fact fix it. And then the same goes on the accounting side. It is absolutely critical for Jason to understand what constitutes tax credit versus not, and to make sure that money's being spent from Dwan down in areas that are maximizing the tax credit. I can't tell you how many projects I've seen on the financing side where they've spent all their money, and we go to look at the books to provide a loan or bring in a lending partner that's going to do that. And everyone's like, we can't lend on this because your accounting is so far off from what the state would need in order for them to approve the spend, that I've seen projects take over a year to redo their books, because they've run out of money at this point. A lot of them, they don't have the wherewithal to go hire Jason and pay him X amount of dollars to go fix it. So they're chasing their tail, trying to realign it. Whereas if they would have had Jackie, Dwan, and a Jason on their project, this is why it's so critical. If you're fortunate enough to have your own financing and you are stepping into a new arena of producing, you absolutely need this type of team there, or you will at some point regret it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would also say, especially if it's a bigger budget movie going for the tax incentive, budget an extra person for that. There's been so many times I've had to do tax incentive from start to finish, and it is very taxing if I don't have an extra clerk or an extra second to sit there and double check everything, to spend the time researching that state's tax incentive, to double check me, because I can't memorize every state's tax incentive. I'm jumping from state to state. I need to remember all of the different guild payroll rules, everything. So having somebody like budging an extra second to just, this is the tax incentive person, that will help to make sure that everything is falling in line.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think to Patrick's point on the legal structuring, I mean, that's the biggest mistake I see people making, is like, oh, we're making this movie, we started our LLC, we're ready to go and jump in and do a cast deal. And it's like, well, do you know where you're filming? Maybe you were filming in New York. Well, if you want the tax credit, you can't use an LLC, right? And so we have ways to structure that. But I think especially in, we're seeing so much in especially Europe right now, and the European co-productions, and those are a little bit more complex and higher level than just opening up a corporation in New York. But not getting ahead of your skis on that, and making sure that you're actually strategically planning your production structuring or your co-production structuring, so that you're not entering into a deal prematurely that then, maybe you can't back out of, and maybe you can't undo it. But some of those nuances of the jurisdiction specific tax credits are, I think, to everyone's point, so important to have an understanding on before you start executing on any of the structuring.
Dewan, you were gonna say something?
I was just gonna say that a lot, when that accounting of the tax credit, a lot of it is Jason was talking about how it is an integral that even my team works with his team, like for every single vendor that we have, because there are a couple states that are changing their rules and making it harder for your vendors to qualify, and so you do need that extra person. We had, my last one was in around 17, and we had two extra people. We had a full accounting department where we had two extra people just to handle, and they were just busy constantly chasing down the vendor documents so that things would qualify. And, and so we had to be aware that we're asking a vendor, are you a certified blah, blah, blah? Do you have this type of paperwork that we have to submit? So now it's more paperwork than your normal, but do you have this paperwork? They say yes. We go, great, hand it over to accounting. And then you find out that no, they actually don't have the right paperwork to be qualified for the tax incentive. So you've got to be aware that you may be trying to budget for a 30% tax incentive, but you got to think about how much that's going to cost to monetize that. So how much of that 30% are you going to lose? Then how much of that 30% are you going to lose for people who just don't have their paperwork together? And crew who really aren't residents, so yeah, there's a lot of, as we call it, assumptions that we have to be prepared for.
I'd like to also bring up something, and maybe Jackie can touch on this. Everybody can touch on it a bit more, because I think everyone's got their hand in it. But what many people don't think about is the delivery side of a movie. You go through, you pray to God that you can actually get the financing. You get lucky enough to make it. Normally you're chopping down every line item in a budget to the point where you're hitting critical mass of like, we're on that threshold. And then you're fortunate enough to get through production. The other thing that no one thinks about, that everyone should be thinking about, and again, why this team on this panel is critical, is you're fortunate enough to get a streamer or studio or distributor like a Blue Fox to come in and offer you a distribution deal. Now you have to deliver the movie. And the first time that you look at a delivery list, it is extremely daunting. It is overwhelming. There's probably 100 different line items of what you need to do on the delivery stage. And if you don't have a good, line producer, attorney, and accountant, you're dead in the water. The key is bringing in these folks early, and really all of these people on the panel know to some degree what a deliverable is on a movie before you even get the Lionsgate's actual list of what they want. And you want to be lining up contracts into a folder. You want to make sure the accounting is all nice and buttoned up and put into a particular area, because someone at some point is going to look at it and have to verify it for them to pay you money to distribute your film. So anyway, it's wanted to throw that out there.
I mean, me and Patrick just experienced something where a guild came back at us. The guild was wrong, but it was only because Jason was our accountant had the numbers right, and my team had their paperwork right. And so we were like, wait a minute, this isn't us. This is a mistake, guild. So they're like, oh, you're right. So
Yeah, I mean, I can't tell you how many phone calls come into our office of, to Patrick's point, hey, we made the movie and everyone was pretty much friends. And, my buddy who's an attorney gave me this like work for hire agreement that we had the actors sign, and everything's great. And like, now we're delivering, and like, we need all this stuff, And I always tell people when I'm on those phone calls of like, I know that legal or accounting or, whoever it may be, feels very expensive when you're starting, and especially when it's one of those situations where you really don't need them to get the thing made. But your fee with bringing, you know, us in at the beginning and making sure it's done right from the start and records are kept and organized is going to be so much less than if we come in at the end and get it delivered. And to Patrick's point, at that point, it's a necessary evil because it's done. You have to deliver it. Everyone's going to require those same checklist items to deliver it. So it's definitely seems like sometimes a good idea to save on a legal or save on a production accountant or any of those roles at the beginning. But I think you will end up not saving in the long run once you know, look at that delivery schedule and see all the things that you haven't done yet.
You know, I should have, I was gonna say this in the beginning, but I always like to say every lawyer's not a lawyer. And I had the really fortunate chance that Ramo Law, they were the first team that I ever worked with, working with other producers that kind of brought me in, Present Pictures a long time ago. And then I went off and worked with other people, and you know, there was one experience that I had where we were going up against SAG, and you know, I think that was you, Jackie, that might even been dealing with that on one of the anthologies we did,
Yeah.
well, a couple years back. And you know, we had to fight a contract. We had to fight. They were trying to hit us with some bull crap, you know, and Jackie went up against them and they backed down. And that was the first time I ever saw a lawyer win like that against SAG. And and I haven't seen it since. So after that, and they knew how, and I know that they know how to set up the project right. I know, you know, that their documents are right there. You know, every lawyer, no matter what lawyer you go to, they're going to ask you, do you have a contract? And then they're going to say, oh, here, I got a better one. It's just, they're going to say it, you know, just and to give you their template. But the templates I get from Ramo Law is just, they're solid. You know, now that I know what I can look for, they're solid. And so, you know, you really, for me, legal's my first call. Accounting is my second call. You know, transpo or location, well, locations will be my third call. You know, and then my second, my UPM, my production super, that, you know, that's the order that I make my calls. Because in this industry, I always feel like legal's the most important. Getting your paperwork in order, because that's going to save you money on the long side.
Yeah, that's a great call out in the sense of like, well, first it's a great roadmap for people watching, but also where to put their priorities with the team. Because I'm seeing a lot of questions about, I'm doing this low budget thing, I'm doing this small thing, I'm doing $1 million thing, I'm doing a $250,000 thing. It's my first time making it. There's a lot of people in the audience in that scenario. And I feel like, I mean, I see this with calls that come to me. I see the budget and I see that, Jason, to your point with the tax credit earlier, that they've seriously under budgeted for accounting, that they don't have enough in their contingency, that, you know, they think they can get away with going full non-union on a, you know, a project on a location that's known to be, you know, to get flipped or to go to be very heavy union. And so I think it's important to kind of dictate, if you are on a very tight budget, how do you maneuver around those things? Because I think Jackie mentioned it, doing these things retroactively and at the end, it never, ever, ever pays off, ever. To be like, I'm going to cut corners from the beginning, whether it's accounting or legal or getting a line producer of a certain caliber or somebody to go through the budget. I've just never seen it pay off. They're doing so much work and spending so much money retroactively. So, Dwan, I'll piggyback off of kind of what you said of who your first call is, like your absolute must people, and kind of throw that to everybody here of like, so I'm on a super tight budget. How should I maneuver around that with building my team?
I'll jump in. I mean, the reality is I have a lot of first calls. Just kind of stepping back into the creative a bit on the producer front of, because we're talking a lot of logistics about the right logistical team, which is crucially important, but I don't want to lose track on the creative side a bit as well. If you are fortunate enough to get $250,000, I've made movies for 400 grand. I made a number of them, one of which is Bloodsucking Bastards. If you guys want to check out, it's a hilarious comedy. Anyway, we shot that for $400,000, and one of the most important elements for me, other than the script itself being good and certainly trusting the director, that I absolutely think is a critical creative partner, is the DP. Because if you don't have a solid DP that has a body of work that you're like, I like that, I like that, I like that you can reference point, you're dead in the water. All of this means nothing if you get a first-time DP that's just not there creatively and can't handle, kind of running the set creatively. If the movie doesn't hold creatively, you're done. We could do everything right. We can come in under budget. None of that matters if you can't sell the movie. So that is one of the first areas that I look at, whether it's a first-time director or a director who's directed 10 movies, they're not shooting the film. And so that always is a very important element to me, because I at least know, no matter what else is going on, the movie's going to look good. And I also would just add one more thing to that, to the DP front. You get a lot, you understand a lot by a conversation with a particular DP of what they're envisioning. And I know everyone can attest to this. You'll understand of a DP whether or not they want to make a $500,000 movie, whether or not they want to shoot the page count necessary to shoot a $500,000 film, whether or not they want a camera package or a light package that's going to be unbelievably expensive for a $500,000 film. It really starts with them creatively, and they have to be on board almost as a producer of what we're trying to accomplish, because they're the first domino with the director that kind of starts falling in place in order for that $500,000 movie to get made.
Yeah, I mean, that DP is, there's a quality is the next part about selling your movie, right? I mean, there's so many factors that you need the DP. The DP is speed as to which you're going to have your setups done. Outside of the ability to have a great gaffer or to know how to sculpt that light so that you have a movie that looks like cinema as opposed to looks like home camera or TV, right? So for me, it's like the quality. It's got to be cinema. We're going for an ASC award, and so, but we don't want to be slow. We have to keep the speed. We've got to make our page count. And on an indie movie, you'd be lucky to have a budget, have a schedule where you're shooting 3 pages a day or 1.5. Good Lord, on an indie. Usually on indies, you're like 3.5 to 5 pages, and God forbid, sometimes you'll see a 7-page day, which is like, that's a television pace. So, but indies are about moving the camera. It's about beautiful shots, or cinema's about that. So the DP, if you want to sell it, you got to have great actors and you got to have a good DP, so, and a great director. So the whole team is really important, and it's really important. The production designer, it's got to look like something. It's got to be a feel. I mean, I do love when we get the chance to start geeking out on the psychology of what's happening on screen. Why is there green every time somebody gets mad? It's like stuff like that. That's the fun part. But it is still a business. So.
Yeah, it is. It's show business. You're 100% right, but I'm glad that Patrick did bring up, because we talk so much about the finance, the people you need to make sure the numbers are right, the payroll company to make sure all accounting's done, the legal. to protect yourself, but we don't talk much on the finance side about the creative side. And it kind of brings up a good discussion of how much does that matter? I'm sure that everyone has worked, if you've been in the industry long enough, you've worked on something where you're like, kind of like hide your face a little bit. But, you know, does it have an impact on taking the show if, you know, you see the script is so awesome and there's no good team members attached, or at least people you recognize, do you still take it? And then I guess the flip side is, you know, you see that a lot of people are attached and the script is not good, but the team around it is very good. Do you still say, well, let's do it because I love the team around it, even though the script it doesn't do anything for me personally, you know?
You're in a good spot when you get to a point where you can start turning down projects. You know, that's when you know you made it in the industry, when you can start saying, no, I don't want to do that. You know, but I do believe in the fact that we're in a creative industry and that the real test is talent. So there may be people that don't have a name, but they're good. I mean, Tom Cruise didn't have a name, yeah, at some point. You know, what was it? Cocktail got him started. I know the producer did that, and he wasn't anybody. Or where'd he start? You know, it was a risky business. Yeah, I mean, you know, but there's
Apps.
something about this kid, you know, something about him. He you know, he had charm. He could act, you know. So it's like that's what I always try to remind people, that it's talent. You know, there's so many ingenues and new people showing up. That's really what you want to go for. So if you have a good script, I mean, we say in our industry, it starts with the script. You have a good script that when you read it, you can't put it down. Well, there's your first plus. I don't know who's in this movie, but when I read this, I can't put it down. So now if you don't have a name, you just got to know what route you're going. Now you're going the festival route. Now you got to make something that's going to make a splash at the festivals. So that's my 2 cents about it. You know.
Yeah, and I will also add too that you know, it just depends on which way you're looking at the coin. If on the financing side, you know, and it's unfortunate, but a lot of these financing companies don't even read scripts. They don't necessarily care who's attached. It's all about the collateral. It's all about, you know, am I going to lend you money against this tax credit, against this Lionsgate pre-sale? How am I protected? And they're going to go immediately to Jackie to make sure that they're protected, or Jackie's going to be negotiating against them on behalf of the producer. But it's all about that, you know. But if you know, on the creative side, less on the financial side, like one of the things that I see a lot, and I've done a number of movies with first-time directors, is, all right, here's an independent movie. It's a $2 million movie, and the writer wants to direct it, or this person's coming to me saying they want to direct it.
I see that a lot.
The challenge with that is you're going after names of actors that mean enough where if they have 1 or 2 bad movies, they can fall off a cliff. And so you're asking them on an independent level to take a big pay cut from what they'd get in a studio film, maybe do something for 25% or less of what they would get as a studio film, to come in on a good script, because the script's great. We all love the script. We read it, with a director that there's nothing that they could ever show that they've directed. It start from me as a producer coming on to say, all right, let me help you put this movie together. It's an unbelievably challenging situation to go into that project and try to package it accordingly, unless you're overpaying the actor, unless you're doing a pay or play where they're guaranteed a certain amount of money. What I advise in those scenarios, and where I think it's completely, we don't talk about it enough in development, is instead of trying to go raise $5 million to go make your movie, go raise $50,000 and spend it in development. Make your movie is your business. Make it sexy and sellable, so that when you go out to actors, you have an unbelievable deck. Maybe you've done a trailer. What we do a lot in movies is We go and shoot one scene, like a very contained scene in a room. We do a rip-o-matic and take a bunch of other movies and create our own trailer. You know, those are the things that a first-time director, in my opinion, they have to do that in order for them to have a fighting chance to get those names that they want. So anyway, just wanted to mention that.
Yeah. Jason, I know you kind of have a dual role because you have a foot in the producing realm as well. So it's like you kind of have to weigh out that you see all the numbers, all the day to day, you know, what's coming in, what's coming out, you know how that needs to be done for an independent. But then from a producer standpoint, you know, you're using both sides of the brain with, you know, I want to see this creativity be there. I want to see the script, you know, glow off the screen. How do you kind of balance that, you know, with the day to day?
I mean, you start off like Patrick and Dwan were saying, it starts with the script. On this latest movie I'm producing, I must have done 6, 7, 8 passes with the writer of rewrites. I mean, even still, I think we still have another pass we're doing. We just finally signed a director, and it's baby steps though. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. You got to take your time. You got to make sure all the pieces are in place before you can even start looking at even a cast. I mean, it's taken us 3 months after we optioned the script to get it where we want it to be, to take it to a director. And it's going to probably be a couple weeks before the director signs, and then we won't even start casting until that's all done. So we're looking at, yeah, it's a good 6 months to a year from when you start on a project before you're even considering going in front of camera.
Yeah.
A question for you, Jason, on that, just to give the audience an example. What was the process like on thinking about what director would be right? And what was the process like to get the director that you're ultimately now hopefully bringing on board?
Well, we lucked out. The person that we hired to do the rewrite of the script had a relationship with this director. He's done 20, 30 movies of this type, and he's a very experienced. He brings a good cast with him. He's worked with a ton of people, so it was kind of a no-brainer. And he'd worked with this writer on a bunch of movies, including their last one they did together. So that was an easy call. The next one I'm doing is going to take a little more research.
And Jackie, like from your perspective on the creative end, when you see a script, do you ask for the script? I guess first of all, I want to know personally. And then second, if you see something, you're like, oh my God, like this thing's going to have legs, like this thing's going to go the distance. I can see a lot of things. Does that change the way you set up the legal? Because you're like, oh, it's going to go through the festivals. It's going to get a tax incentive. It's going to have a sequel. It's going to have, payouts down the road or back end things because it has so many legs. Does the script affect, even at your level, the legality of a production?
No. I mean, we at Ramo have a packaging and sales team that are attorneys, and their job is to sort of intake all the scripts for all the projects that we work on, and they do script coverage and sort of will talk to us about it. For me personally, I do a lot of rights and clearances work. So I do a lot of script clearance. And that's when I really get into the script. And then anything where I'm engaged on like a full-fledged production or financing legal capacity, it's just my personal rule that I think it helps with the deal making, whether it's, cast deals or knowing what a VFX budget probably has to look like. It helps me have just that context. So yes and no. There are certain ones that I read a script on. There are certain ones that I don't, and it really doesn't affect the legality. Although I do think having that context can just help my instincts on the deal making side of things. But if I'm excited about a project, or it's a client that I have a relationship with and I think the script is really wonderful, I mean, I inevitably love crossing into that slightly creative capacity where, I mean, last Saturday morning I had a director call me and say, hey, like we've got a casting director, we've got a little bit of financing set up, like what's your advice on what I do next? And like that for me is just fun. And I have those conversations with people that I have relationships with, and And it's, there's no right or wrong answer. So that is just a creative conversation in and of itself, and thinking outside the box and how to get those elements attached. But does it, affect the deal making to say, hey, this might have a huge net profit payout? Maybe. I also, you never really know, because execution is so much of it too. I mean, it's a great script is wonderful, but if you can't put the elements together and execute on it, it's not always the only thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I always say, like, the greatest script is out there. Somebody thinks they have the greatest script, but they just don't. Once again, they're not surrounding themselves, or haven't had the ability to surround themselves with the right team members to know the business side of it. The legal, line producing, doing the budget, how to, work with a sales agent and distribution, and all the stuff we've talked about today. We are about 10 minutes away from the closing, so I have been hitting as many questions as I can and kind of peppering them into the conversation as we're going. Feel free to send more. I see them all here. There's a lot. One of the ones coming up the most, and there's a whole slew of tax credit questions and incentive questions. We could do, and we have done, a whole other panel on that. So I just want to call that out. Please research that with IFTA or AFM. We've done all those also on the Wrap Book. There's my plug, wrapbook.com. We have a whole incentive center about the basics in and outs of tax credits and tax incentives. But so many people are just kind of asking, I'm new to this. This is a big part of the audience. This is the big reason we do this. And how did you start out? And it doesn't have to be like, this is where I went to college, but like, just the networking. We've talked about it time and time again. Jason just stated on his show, the person he was working with knew somebody that knew somebody. It's so crucial, networking in this industry. That's why webinars like this exist. That's why AFM exists, and all the other film events that we have throughout the country and even out of the country. So what advice would you give to people just starting out, the advantage of networking? Do you have any recommendations to get their name out there and get more visibility and exposure to people like yourselves?
I think everybody tries to like network up, but I've found the most consistent success in industry is to network within your own peer group. And because what I notice from that, your peer group will move up, right? And so before you know it, the guy or girl you were talking to a couple months or years back is now running a studio, or is in a position, or now runs their own finance company, and so, your peer group moves up. And so you want to find that group of like-minded people that you enjoy working with, because we work too many hours and it's too grueling to not have fun while you're doing it, and to not be with like-minded people. So find that peer group, expand it, bring as many creative and go-getters as you can in there, and make good content, and just watch you start stepping up, and because it happens.
Yeah, be nice to people. Be nice to people. I mean, I've had
Basic stuff,
it's it's that old saying, today's PA is tomorrow's producer. I've had so many people just call me with just so much attitude over something, where it's like, just be nice. And moving into producing, I have a list of names of people I will never hire, because as an accountant, they came to me with attitude. I'm like, well, if they're treating me like this, how are they going to treat other people on a project? So be nice to everybody. There's no reason to be mean to people.
I like that one. I like that one on a human level, because it's just like, it is a relatively small industry. Everybody kind of talks, reputations can get out there. People move up so significantly. And, it's just a matter of, did you like working with them? Were they conscious of the fact that this is a hard industry and we're all kind of in it together? We want it to work, and we have to be collaborative in those things, So we talked about all the people to have on the team, but to Jason's point, there might be people you find that you don't want on your team. So maybe that's another panel. Jackie?
I mean, I think to piggyback off of both of those things, it's like I always believe in taking the extra 5 minutes and asking the follow-up question, right? Because that's where I find, I get a call that's about a project, and maybe I don't have the extra 5 minutes, but I start talking to people about, what they used to do or what their interests are. And I literally had this happen yesterday where I started sort of just had a genuine conversation, and somebody said, hey, by the way, I actually on this totally unrelated project have this other thing, and I need a little bit of legal work on it. And actually they're engaging on that instead of the one thing that they called me about. And so I think, genuine relationships, friendships, clients that become friends, and being nice to people, and always just taking the time to, treat the people that you work with like people, and making sure that you really get to know them. I mean, that's how I've gotten all of my business. It's not really random reach outs. It's people that actually know me, that I see, 8 to 10 times a year and have a genuine relationship with.
Yeah, I'll echo everyone. You guys can't see, but there's a poster I have in my office that says "Work hard and be nice to people," right to the left of my camera, and that is to me the absolute model of, like, I'm grateful when someone shows their true colors, because it's like I can just push them to the side and only focus on with people that are like-minded, that I see how they interact with people around them. And to echo what everyone's saying, including Dwan, like, I'm looking for people that are as motivated as I am, to get stuff made, and are willing to work as hard as we are. And I will, kind of bring it back to, because obviously it's important to work with good people, but Jackie, you had mentioned a couple minutes ago about a packaging side, and I know I'm seeing these questions too as they're coming in. A lot of people are just asking this question: how do I get it made? How do I bring in the right team? And you guys are very unique, I believe. I don't know of another law firm that has a packaging side within it.
Yeah.
What do you do on the packaging side, and what's the advantage to a producer coming to you to have your team help them package the project?
Yeah, I mean, when the law firm was started, I think 20 years ago, they, really identified that we have a lot of these phone calls of people like yourself, how do I get it made? I need legal early, but it's not the first thing I need, right? And so they built out this packaging and sales team in the law firm, which is a very unique thing that we have, which is sort of, intake of scripts and potentially connecting you with the right director, or helping you talk to a sales agent, or maybe we have a financier client who just said, I really want to invest in a low budget documentary about something that I think is cool. Like, those things really happen. And then, if you've just submitted this low budget documentary idea, maybe we make that connection. And so it's a unique offering of, like, how do we help, people that are saying, I just need that little edge of help, or that one connection, or that one meeting, or help setting meetings at something like AFM if I'm going to show up. And that's what our packaging and sales team do. And they really do a lot. They're kind of a jack of all trades in the financing and the creative side of things, but their job is to help you sort of cross that short bridge to get to the point where you need legal, where you need accounting, and all of those things become very real.
Yeah, I love that you called out a documentary, because that's actually a lot of some of the questions we've had, is people asking, so much of the team we have on here, people assume it's just for scripted feature or whatever, and they want to know, do we interact, and would we work, and have we worked with, documentaries, unscripted, reality, shorts, or whatever type of projects, and would the team be different? I could say personally, like, we work with a gamut of the slew of them, unscripted, and reality quite a lot, and tons of independent features. But for everyone else, are you guys, Jackie, you mentioned that, so I'm assuming you guys take on a variety of type of productions, and I'm assuming the way you navigate the legality of those could be different.
Yeah, I mean, they're very different. I mean, I run the rights and clearances department at Ramo Law. So on, like, the life rights, or the unscripted, defamation issues, fair use opinion letters, errors and omissions insurance. I mean, we could do a whole another conversation on all of those things that, it crosses over into scripted, but it sort of is its own beast in the unscripted space as well. And there's a lot of other things that you need to know about if you're delivering to a network in the unscripted space, background checks and you know, the deliverables on an unscripted production look a lot different than scripted. And so yeah, this was very scripted focused, but we do a lot of that, and it's its own beast for sure.
Gotcha.
Yeah, documentaries on my side are so much subject and director focused that you know, the other, from my point of view, the other kind of things don't really matter depending on, I mean, we did a music documentary where, you know, it was the subject people that we had to gather, we had to go out and get all these well-known names for music, but it still is so, just the focus, that director and how they want to approach the subject matter, capturing the subject matter, that was really just being in their mind. That's the unique thing about the documentary. You know, and it's, of
Yeah,
course,
I know.
yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, go
I
ahead.
said, I know over at my company, I have a whole department that handles unscripted reality TV and docuseries. Then I myself have done multiple documentaries. They are very long projects. They generally last anywhere from 9 months to 2.5 years. And there's not a lot of money in it. But what's nice about my company, at least, is because we handle multiple projects, I'm able to work on those without needing a big payout. I can go ahead and afford to work on these smaller projects that I feel passionate about, that I think are really good ideas.
Yeah, and there's the networking behind that, right? You're like working on those projects. You know, some of the people that make great features and whatnot, they might have started doing docs or some sort of, you know, project that followed a person, and so, you know, in the reality realm. So all about the networking. Patrick, you guys work with unscripted stuff as well?
Yeah, I mean, as a distribution and sales company, we do, you know, primarily film that has a theatrical release component. That's one of the big hooks for us. We do documentaries, both domestic distribution, international sales, and we are crossing into television as well. And that's both distribution, sales, and financing.
Cool. Well, there you go. That answers that question, because that came up quite a few times. And with that, you know, there's a lot of questions once again, we could do whole panels on, and I feel like we could talk for hours about a variety of things. But there's a resource of past panels that have been done that cover a lot of that. I've mentioned other resources out there as well, including wrapbook.com. I'll say it one more time, why not? But I'll kick it back to Robin, and I hope to see you guys at AFM as well. And really enjoyed the panel. Pleasure to host these amazing panelists and to hear their insights. So thank you so much.
So thanks, Ryan. And thanks to all the panelists as well. Thank you for your sharing your knowledge, your insight and expertise on this really important topic. A recording of the webinar will be made available early next week. And like Ryan said, we hope that you'll join us in Las Vegas. The dates are November 5 through 10. In fact, so Patrick will be there speaking. I know Ryan will be there speaking as well. So, and all the topics from treatment to screen and everything in between. So if you want to buy a badge, go to americanfilmmarket.com. And thank you again, the panelists. And thank you all for listening. And we hope to see you at our next finance webinar. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Robin. Thanks, Jennifer.